part of our galaxy. It is just sailing
Jupiter and Saturn, providing detailed images and scientific data on their atmospheres, rings, and moons. It sent back stunning photographs and groundbreaking information that deepened our understanding of these distant worlds. Beyond just visiting planets, Voyager 1 was also on a mission to study the space between them. This interplanetary space had never been explored in such detail before, and Voyager 1 provided a wealth of information about the solar wind, magnetic fields, and cosmic rays in this vast, uncharted region. As a part of its mission, Voyager 1 carried a golden record, a message to any potential extraterrestrial civilizations that might one day come across it. This record contained sounds and images meant to convey the story of Earth and its inhabitants. Voyager 1's journey has been nothing short of extraordinary. For decades, it has been traveling farther from Earth than any other human-made object, reaching the edge of our solar system and beyond. But this incredible voyage hasn't come without its own set of challenges. As Voyager 1 moves farther away, maintaining communication with this far-flung emissary of humanity becomes increasingly difficult. Let's explore the hurdles that come with keeping in touch with a spacecraft that's now a staggering distance from Earth. How do scientists ensure they're still receiving data from this remarkable journey? Challenges in maintaining communication. Voyager 1 ventures deeper into the cosmos. Maintaining a connection with this distant spacecraft presents a formidable challenge. The technical hurdles are immense, and each communication session requires precise and intentional efforts from NASA's Deep Space Network, DSN, which is responsible for tracking and receiving data from space missions. Voyager 1's journey to the outer reaches of our solar system brings it further away from Earth, making the signals weaker and harder to detect. The spacecraft communicates using radio signals that travel across vast distances. By the time these signals reach Earth, anomalies and explore what they could reveal about the spacecraft's enigmatic journey through the far reaches of space. The shocking discovery: anomalies in control systems. Recently, new data from Voyager 1 has unveiled some startling anomalies in its control systems, sparking excitement and intrigue within the scientific community. These anomalies, detected in the spacecraft's telemetry data, indicate unexpected variations in how Voyager 1's systems are functioning. The changes have raised a host of questions about the spacecraft's health and operational status as it travels through interstellar space. What makes this discovery so puzzling is the nature of the anomalies. The control systems, which regulate the spacecraft's orientation and power distribution, are exhibiting behaviors that were not anticipated by mission planners. For instance, there are deviations in the expected telemetry signals and strange movements in the spacecraft's attitude control. These inconsistencies could potentially impact the accuracy of the data Voyager 1 is sending back to Earth and its ability to continue functioning optimally. The implications of these anomalies are profound. They challenge our current understanding of how spacecraft systems perform in the extreme conditions of interstellar space. They also highlight the limits of our technology and the mysteries that still surround deep space exploration. Scientists are now faced with the task of interpreting this new data and determining whether these anomalies could affect Voyager 1's long-term mission goals, or even its ability to send back valuable scientific information. Whitney Webb's investigative efforts have played a crucial role in bringing these anomalies to light. Her thorough examination and reporting on the issue have helped uncover critical details that might have otherwise remained buried. Her work deepens the importance of transparency and diligent investigation in unraveling the complexities of space exploration. As we delve deeper into the mysteries surrounding Voyager, magnetic field. Just 3 years later, Voyager 2 continued its pioneering journey with a flyby of Neptune, capturing stunning images of its stormy atmosphere and its intriguing moon, Triton. These discoveries reshaped our understanding of the outer planets, revealing details that had previously eluded astronomers. Voyager 1, after its impressive planetary encounters, embarked on its interstellar journey. It became the first human-made object to enter interstellar space, crossing the heliopause in 2012. This monumental milestone marked a new chapter in space exploration, as Voyager 1 began sending back data from beyond the influence of our Sun. One of the key breakthroughs of the Voyager missions was their contribution to our understanding of the solar system's boundary. The probes provided critical insights into the heliosphere, the vast bubble of solar wind that envelops our solar system, and its interaction with the interstellar medium. Voyager 1's observations helped define the characteristics of this boundary, and offered a glimpse into the environment that lies between the stars. Another notable achievement was the discovery of the magnetic fields and complex atmospheres of the outer planets, which have had significant implications for our understanding of planetary science. Voyager data also provided new insights into the origins and structure of planetary rings, enhancing our knowledge of the dynamic processes shaping these distant worlds. As Voyager 1 and Voyager 2 continue their historic journeys, they remain beacons of human curiosity and innovation, sending back invaluable data that deepens our grasp of the universe. Their missions have paved the way for future exploration and have set a high standard for the exploration of distant realms. Voyager 1's contributions to understanding the outer planets and research. The insights into Saturn's rings and Titan's atmosphere have shaped our understanding of planetary ring systems and moon atmospheres, contributing to a broader comprehension of the outer solar system's dynamics. These findings also set the stage for future missions, such as the Cassini-Huygens mission, which continued the exploration of Saturn and its moons, building on the groundwork laid by Voyager 1. Voyager 1's contributions extend beyond its immediate discoveries. The data collected has helped refine our models of planetary science, influencing how scientists study and interpret the environments of distant planets and moons. The probe's findings have provided valuable context for understanding the evolution and characteristics of planetary systems, both within our own solar system and in exoplanetary systems beyond. As we reflect on the remarkable achievements of Voyager 1, we turn our attention to Voyager 2, which has also played a crucial role in expanding our knowledge of the outer solar system. Join us as we explore Voyager 2's milestones and how this spacecraft has complemented and extended the discoveries made by its twin, furthering our quest to understand the cosmos. Voyager 2's milestones, expanding our knowledge. Voyager 2 didn't just follow in the footsteps of its sibling. It charted its own extraordinary course through the outer reaches of our solar system, making groundbreaking discoveries that have reshaped our understanding of Uranus and Neptune. When Voyager 2 arrived at Uranus in 1986, it became the first spacecraft to visit this distant ice giant. The encounter was nothing short of revelatory. Voyager 2's instruments sent back detailed images of Uranus's unique, tilted ring system, which had been a mystery from Earth-based observations. It revealed a system of dark, narrow rings, some of which were previously unknown. This new sending data back to Earth from billions of miles away. One of the most remarkable aspects of the Voyager missions is their longevity. When the probes were launched in 1977, their mission was expected to last about 5 years, but they far exceeded this expectation. The key to their longevity lies in their meticulous engineering and the careful management of their power and systems. The probes were equipped with a radioisotope thermoelectric generator, RTG, which provides a steady source of power by converting the heat from radioactive decay into electricity. This RTG has been crucial for maintaining the spacecraft's instruments and communication systems long after conventional power sources would have failed. Moreover, the Voyager team has demonstrated exceptional skill in remote troubleshooting and maintenance. Engineers on Earth have managed to resolve various technical challenges over the years, from software glitches to hardware malfunctions, by sending commands to the probes from billions of miles away. This ability to adapt and problem solve has been vital in keeping the spacecraft operational. The Voyager probes also benefited from a meticulously planned mission design, which included a variety of redundant systems and fail-safes to ensure continued operation. Their onboard computers, although primitive by today's standards, have proven to be surprisingly resilient. Despite the distance and the challenges of deep space, the probe's engineering has allowed them to continue functioning and returning valuable scientific data long past their intended mission lifespan. And so, granted, these technological marvels are a wonder to our minds, but it's essential to understand one of the key factors that contributed to their success: gravity assists. This technique played a pivotal role in extending the Voyager's reach and capabilities, allowing them to explore regions of space that would have been otherwise inaccessible. Curious about how this clever maneuver worked and why it was so crucial to the Voyager's journey, let's delve into the fascinating role Maintaining communication with these far-flung probes is another monumental challenge. How does NASA ensure that it can continue to talk to these spacecraft despite their immense distance from Earth? The answer lies in the Deep Space Network, a system that's crucial for keeping the line open between us and these intrepid explorers. The Deep Space Network, ensuring communication. The Deep Space Network, or DSN, is like the lifeline connecting Earth to the farthest reaches of our solar system and beyond. Managed by NASA, this vast network consists of 3 large radio antennas strategically placed around the globe, in California, Spain, and Australia. These antennas are colossal, each with a dish spanning up to 70 meters or 230 feet across, designed to pick up the faintest signals from spacecraft that are light years away. The DSN's role is crucial. It acts as a giant ear to catch the weak signals sent back by spacecraft like Voyager 1 and Voyager 2. As these probes travel further into the void of space, Their signals become incredibly weak, needing advanced technology to detect and interpret them. The DSN ensures that every bit of data, every scientific finding, and every status update from these distant explorers is received and understood. The network isn't just about listening, though. It also sends commands to the spacecraft, guiding their operations and managing their instruments. The DSN's antennas are equipped with sophisticated tracking systems to keep the spacecraft's location in precise view, even as they move rapidly through space. This means that while Voyager 1 might be billions of miles away, it's still under our watchful eye thanks to this incredible network. Maintaining this level of communication over such vast distances is no small feat. It requires constant coordination, precise timing, and the latest in technology to ensure that in 55 languages, music spanning numerous cultures and eras, natural sounds, and images depicting humanity's achievements and everyday life. For an alien race, discovering such a record might offer a mesmerizing glimpse into our world and ignite their curiosity about Earth and its inhabitants. But the Voyager's contributions go beyond this symbolic message. Even as their power wanes, they're still sending back valuable data from interstellar space, deepening our understanding of the cosmos. The information they collect about cosmic rays, magnetic fields, and plasma densities helps scientists piece together the puzzle of what lies beyond our solar system. This continuous stream of data reveals the composition of interstellar space and the forces shaping our galaxy, enriching our knowledge and inspiring future generations. Reflecting on the incredible journey of the Voyagers highlights the boundless curiosity and perseverance driving scientific exploration. The heliopause, once a mysterious boundary at the edge of our solar system, has been crossed, opening new avenues for discovery. The legacy of the Voyager missions will fuel the curiosity of scientists and explorers for generations to come, ensuring that our quest to understand the universe continues. Legacy and future of the Voyager missions. As we look towards the horizon of the Voyager missions, it's clear that the end is in sight for these pioneering spacecraft. Voyager 1 and Voyager 2, having surpassed their initial mission objectives by decades, are gradually approaching the limits of their operational lifespan. With each passing year, their power supplies diminish, and their instruments become less reliable. Yet, the Voyager missions continue to provide invaluable data, and their legacy is far from fading. The Voyager missions have not only exceeded expectations, but have fundamentally reshaped our understanding of the solar system and beyond. or the unknown. From its groundbreaking discoveries of Jupiter's great red spot to its awe-inspiring views of Saturn's rings and Titan's mysterious atmosphere, Voyager 1 has provided insights that have reshaped our understanding of the outer planets and the solar system as a whole. As it drifts further into interstellar space, Voyager 1 continues to be a beacon of human curiosity and technological prowess. Its data have offered new perspectives on cosmic rays, magnetic fields, and the heliosphere, deepening our knowledge of the space environment beyond our solar system. The mission's longevity, surpassing all expectations, highlights the incredible engineering and foresight that went into its design, and it stands as a testament to the enduring spirit of scientific discovery. Yet, as we celebrate these monumental achievements, we must also consider the future of space exploration. With each passing year, Voyager 1's instruments will grow less reliable, and communication will become increasingly challenging. What happens when we finally lose contact with this venerable probe? Will its final messages be a whisper lost in the void? Or will they offer new revelations before it fades into silence? As we reflect on the legacy of Voyager 1, we must ask ourselves, what if the anomalies detected in its control systems were not just technical glitches, but signals of something far more profound? Could Voyager 1 have stumbled upon evidence of a cosmic phenomenon we're not yet prepared to understand?
So what we're having is the engineering of a neo-feudal society where you have the small upper class and then a massive underclass that the upper class can manipulate and control and do whatever they want with as they see fit.
Whitney Webb has also explored how the internet, once seen as a great equalizer, has increasingly become a tool for surveillance and control in the hands of billionaires and tech giants.
I think there's a lot of people in Congress that get into Congress campaigning on certain issues, and then once they're there long enough, they backtrack completely.
Webb suggests that the influx of billionaires into the cryptocurrency space could lead to the centralization of power within what was originally intended to be a decentralized system.
As I think, a lot of what we're facing is an energetic and spiritual battle, I guess you could say. And I think in order, if you're afraid of these people, you're giving them power over you. And I think really the only way to win this is to have your commitment to, what you're fighting for, the good about humanity, to be total.
As these wealthy individuals and corporations invest heavily in Bitcoin, they can potentially manipulate the market, driving volatility that disproportionately affects smaller investors.
There's been a push for several years, but now it's gaining an insane amount of momentum in steam. But it really goes back several years. And the goal is to have a regulated internet, which means the end of online privacy and anonymity. And they want to do this by having people link a government-issued ID to their internet access and internet activity.
Who is they?
So in the U.S., it's come from the government, but it's not. A lot of government policy, whether it's about this or something else, doesn't come organically from the government. It comes from think tanks. It comes from groups like that, or even the WEF, the World Economic Forum, that are then given to politicians, and politicians legislate and enact it, and then the state enforces it. But it's not necessarily the ideas of the legislature and the state itself, these policies. And more often than not, these think tanks are funded by corporations and billionaires and all of these guys. And they also own the politicians, so it's really them creating the policy. And they use the state as an enforcer to force it on the public, right? So that's, I guess, the global public-private partnership is what my colleague Ian Davis calls they, right? One of the earliest iterations of it, at least in the United States, was during the Obama administration. They called it a driver's license for the internet. The idea of, in order to access the internet, when you set up, internet connection at your house, the internet service provider links all of your internet traffic to your ID. And in doing so, the government and the signals intelligence arm or intelligence agency of the government then has access to not just everything you're posting and writing online, but also everything you read.
I think there's been a major effort to control the media and how much information gets to the American public about all sorts of things. If you look at the Epstein case, you're only allowed to talk about his sex crimes from 2000 to 2006. Don't look at his financial crimes or any of the thing he did before the year 2000 is, pretty much how mainstream media handles the case. And that's pretty, there's a lot to find if you go back farther.
So in terms of what we're talking about with government, regulation of the internet and all of this, it's coming, right? We're already seeing the first signs of it here. There's an obvious push to censor more speech and link people's speech to their ID and have it more surveillable than ever before. Gutting encryption, why do they want to do that? So they can read everything that you say and all your transactions, follow them all. There's a similar effort in crypto and specifically with Bitcoin to criminalize mixers and criminalize any sort of service that affords you increased financial privacy. So it's already started, but what I'm trying to say is that where they want to take this, if anyone uses a mixer, they can go after you. That's what they want to set up. They don't want anyone to have financial privacy or online privacy anymore. And that's what part of this agenda about a regulated internet is. And it directly ties in with stuff like a central bank digital currency, at least what people are concerned about a CBDC for, which is the surveillance capability and the programmability aspect. It's all tied up with this effort to regulate the internet, which isn't really fair to say it's regulating the internet. It's more like taking complete control of the internet, a complete coup of the internet for unprecedented surveillance and control of people's online lives. At the same time that you have these same entities pushing for people to live their lives online as much as possible as part of the fourth industrial revolution and all of this other stuff. Like we saw in the COVID era, we're locking down. You can't go out and do stuff in the physical world. You have to be online as much as possible. Education's online. Work is online. As much of your life as possible has to be online now because you can't go in person to the bank. You can't go in person to this. You should order your groceries through your phone and all of this stuff, So they're pushing us more and more into the digital realm and at the same time preparing to take more control of the digital realm than they have now by a significant degree. And that's not a coincidence. I'm sorry if you think that's coincidental. That's very naive.
So yeah, centralization I think is part of it, but also I think there's a lot of people, psychologists specifically, that work for, the public relations industry or propaganda arms of governments, for example, or intelligence agencies that have studied very closely how to manipulate human behavior with technology. And I think when you consider that a lot of social media companies have their origins with intelligence, or if they didn't at the beginning, they certainly do now. And how they know that, the news feeds on social media can be used to manipulate people's emotions or manipulate how people perceive events and reality. They leverage that. And to think they don't leverage that, I think would be really naive. So as an example, one that's sort of well-known and easy to find if you search for it online, is Facebook attempting to study how to manipulate people's emotions to make them feel more negatively, intentionally make them more depressed, by bombarding them with largely negative news on their news feed, right? And so, we can assume that they do that with all sorts of things and specific events. And when you consider the fact that we know now, and we've known for some time, quite frankly, that a lot of these companies, for example, selectively censor things, they're trying to cultivate the public's perception of events and reality and all sorts of different things. So Robert Maxwell was involved in many things, but he definitely played a major role in undermining U.S. national security by selling bug software to nuclear laboratories in the United States. And this was directly facilitated by well-known statesmen in U.S. history, like Henry Kissinger, for example. And a lot of the people, I think, that enabled him, at least on the U.S. side, tend to be those that favor global governance and, they kind of don't want the U.S. to have that kind of monopoly on
on power. You have to look at this network, and they've evolved over time, right? Robert Maxwell was very close to the Eastern Bloc. He had a very close relationship with intelligence figures in the KGB and also Bulgaria. He had a relationship with British intelligence and Israeli intelligence, and was involved in aspects of what later became known as Iran-Contra, which of course involves aspects of U.S. intelligence. So, I mean, he had his hands in, everywhere and everything. And I think ultimately people like him are interested in any deal they can make to advance their money and their power and their influence, they'll take it. So Robert Maxwell was very interested in having his family be like the Kennedy family, a political power dynasty. And that's part of why he started moving into New York City around, just a year or two before he ended up dying. And Ghislaine Maxwell was sent to New York sort of to be his emissary. Into the U.S., and he wanted her actually to marry a Kennedy, and this is attested to in past mainstream media reports. And you can see his efforts to get her close to, I think, one of the sons of Robert F. Kennedy, and also John F. Kennedy Jr., trying to get her sort of in that social tier, because he sort of saw that as, would advance his power and also, that of his children. And I think if you look a lot at the psychology of Robert Maxwell, he seems to have had narcissistic elements, and that could be because of the trauma of his past. And a lot of times narcissistic parents see their children as extensions of themselves. Yeah. And so, that he's looking at how to build an empire and using his children to that effect. And you sort of see that with the psychology of Ghislaine Maxwell. Well, I guess I don't really know exactly why that would be, but the silence is very eerie about major aspects of the Epstein case. It ended up being 1,000 pages because as I was writing about Epstein, a lot of the connections that came up, I was just, increasingly aware that a lot of people in the American public, a lot of the names I was coming across, most people weren't going to be familiar with.
Correct.
Banks like the Bank of Credit and Commerce International, or BCCI, the scandal that involved, or even things like Iran-Contra, people may have heard the name but don't really know what it involved. So I figured I was going to have to go back and sort of explain that to people. So that type of context is volume 1 of the book, and also the history of sexual blackmail and how it's been sort of an undercurrent in some past political scandals in American history, and how in these sorts of networks in which Epstein was inhabiting, that type of practice and exploitation even of minors for those purposes was actually disturbingly common. So Epstein starts to look less and less of he's not an anomaly, basically.
Right.
By the time you get through with volume 1. And so volume 2 is sort of my effort to, dig up as much as I could, with stuff that's publicly available, really, about Epstein, and also his greatest benefactor, Leslie Wexner, and then also, Ghislaine Maxwell. But even they don't, today, I think we've moved away from the type of model that Epstein used for sexual blackmail. It's an era of electronic blackmail, and you don't even have to do anything wrong. They can just plant it on your devices and play gotcha that way. So it's really an unprecedented situation. And a lot of these intelligence agencies, as I note in the book, really for decades have been totally out of control. And I really start off the book talking about how intelligence agencies and organized crime in the U.S. got in bed together, and really that symbiosis. It was originally justified out of wartime necessity during World War II.
Fighting the Nazis.
But it never stopped, right?
Right.
And it's, business is business. And some of these people in our own national security state, realized they could make a lot of money working with organized crime and really shielding them and getting in on the spoils, I guess you could say. All I really want to add to that is that it's important to keep in mind that, when the petrodollar system has been, the standard for keeping the dollar, the global, or reserve currency, the U.S. has gone to war and killed millions of people to defend that. One of the likely motivations, obviously there's more than one, but one of the key ones in invading Iraq, I would argue, was the fact that Saddam Hussein, not long before the invasion, had started selling oil in euros instead of dollars and made a lot more money, showing by example to other, other OPEC members that they could make more money selling in different currencies than the dollar. And then, of course, you have the case of Libya in 2011, where Gaddafi was trying to move to a gold-backed currency called the dinar, and was selling that to African countries, a lot of which either use dollars or they use, French financial stuff, and that's why you had the U.S. and France essentially lead that regime change operation with devastating consequences for Libya, which used to be the safest country in Africa, then became the most dangerous, and has been cited as an example of or a reason for why immigration got so out of control in Europe after that point. So there are cases where the U.S. government, or rather U.S. empire, is willing to go to extreme lengths to defend the dollar. So the idea that they would just sit idly by and just let dollarization happen without having some sort of plan in the works, especially knowing that they couldn't keep this going indefinitely and that the world was going to move at some point to a post-oil economy. I think it's important to keep in mind that these people have been very serious and played very dirty and created insane instability just to keep the dollar the global reserve currency, because it gives a lot of advantages just to the US. And I fully feel that they intend to keep those advantages, even if it means a different system. As an example, this push for a regulated internet and the end of online anonymity and all of that is directly related to the fact that it's a mathematical inevitability that our debt-based monetary system will collapse at some point, and that the banking system, particularly Wall Street, and its global equivalents, have engaged in an unprecedented degree of malfeasance and corruption and insane financial gambling activities. And just like 2008, right? That's going to explode at some point. But in 2008, people knew it was the banks and they were mad at the banks, weren't they? So if you're the banks and that's going to happen again, and you're in bed with the intelligence agencies and the government, or in the case of the US, you own the central bank, right? You don't want that to happen again. So how do you find a way to blame somebody else for the financial system imploding? And when you bring the financial system back, what do these people, people like Jamie Dimon and all these top bankers, what is their ideal scenario for money and how people interact with and use money? Well, being able to grift as much as you want and take as much as you want from the people under you without them knowing or complaining, because that's what they've been doing for decades, right? Wall Street. So they want to keep doing that. They don't want to change their behavior. So they want to find a way to be able to steal from the underclass as much as possible without the underclass complaining or revolting, and control how they spend their money, and control their financial and other behavior so that they can maintain their place on the top. A lot of the people that own this technology that's having these other psychosocial impacts, negative impacts on humanity, are also controlled by a very centralized group that has very specific agendas. In my opinion, they're essentially in control of the U.S. government, and they're very, I see them as pretty much overtly fascist at this point. A lot of the Silicon Valley billionaires very interested in having very tight control over the U.S. Political system. They do, in terms of political financing and stuff of both parties. An example, former CEO of Google, Eric Schmidt, is funding major parts of the Biden administration right now. He's been a longtime big donor to the Democrats specifically, but he's basically been in charge of national security AI policy. He was the chair of the National Security Commission on AI. And if you read the book he wrote on AI with Henry Kissinger, he basically describes as his mentor on this stuff. It discusses a lot of these trends and talks about basically how AI is going to essentially, they don't call it a neo-feudal society, but they basically talk about how it's going to stratify society into two classes. And basically the people who program and maintain and direct the objectives of AI will be in one class. And then there's this large underclass that AI will act upon, and they won't understand what AI is doing to them. And they also say that people that become dependent on AI for decision making, for writing, for communicating, all sorts of stuff, will become cognitively diminished. And we can already sort of see it happening to an extent with how massive generative AI has become with GPT, for example. The whole idea that people have known for a long time, if you don't use it, you lose it. So, if you're a writer, for example, you use ChatGPT to write some stuff for you. Maybe you do it occasionally at first, but then you become dependent on it, and then you forget
how to write without it. I mean, that's essentially what they're talking about. And that's where they're taking us with really everything AI is offering to help us with. And ultimately, people that are so cognitively diminished, they can't understand what's happening to them, while you have this programmer class at the top that's like directing how AI herds us all. They're openly talking about how this is going to be the impact of that technology.
Well, I think when you're talking about intelligence agencies, there's hierarchies. So there's like people maybe low in different levels that may think what they're doing is right and advancing American interests. But then there's people at the top that aren't necessarily like that, and it's about advancing their own interests. If you look at a lot of controversial intelligence operations and decisions, coups, for example, of the past, a lot of it was justified as going against communist influence, trying to keep that from growing. But then some of these same actors, like the Iran-Contra types, they ended up getting involved with the Chinese government just a few years later in the 1990s. And some of this blossomed into what a lot of conservatives today remember as Chinagate during the Clinton administration and things like that. So, they really have no allegiance to anything except their desire to grow their own money and power.
Now, how do people get into the elite? Not everyone that's in the elite today was born into it, right? I mean, they cultivate into their ranks people that are like, psychopaths, controlled by greed and all of that stuff to come flesh it out, right? Or people they think are talented that they think they can use, and that will, if they're offered a big piece of the pie or a big enough piece of the pie, will join them, right? So it's not like these people are the people that have been there since the 1500s, and they're all still that today. You know what I mean? But I mean, in terms of the behavior of like a ruling elite, it's very similar to what it was in the feudal era, like in the Dark Ages, which again, how did the Dark Ages succeed so successfully in that? Extreme control of information. It was all in the church, right? No one knew how to read and write but them. So it was against centralized control of information and also of money. And we're going to that same paradigm again, but for the modern era. So all this technology is going to try and set up those systems for us. And I think people need to be really aware of all these, in the next couple of years, without a doubt, there's going to be these events, whether it's like COVID or 9/11 or whatever, they're not going to be the same as those, but they're going to be these big events that generate a lot of fear and panic, and mainstream media is going to be traumatizing people with it. And then are going to sell a particular solution. I think the FBI has been compromised from the very beginning. In the book, I talk a lot about J. Edgar Hoover. He was blackmailed by the mob. He realized the power blackmail had, started using blackmail himself. And increasingly the FBI, and I think it's very obvious to a lot of conservatives now, comes in to cover things up and to, go after, figures that they, don't want to advance in their careers or any sort of thing. It's very complicated. So what do we do as a country when, there needs to be massive investigations of all sorts of stuff, Jeffrey Epstein being one, and, the government is increasingly incapable of investigating itself, especially when you're looking at the FBI or something. That's particularly glaring with the Epstein-Clinton relationship. You have someone like Jeffrey Epstein that described himself in the 80s as a financial bounty hunter. He was hiding or finding looted money for powerful people. That's coming from him. And he said this to numerous people. There's numerous sources attesting to this. So obviously he was very comfortable with the offshore financial system, shadow banking, and all of that. And then in the late 80s, in addition to becoming involved with Leslie Wexner's finances, he is involved in orchestrating one of the largest Ponzi schemes in U.S. history. The other person he worked with in that, Stephen Hoffenberg, is arrested and goes to jail for that in 1993. Epstein's name is dropped from the case, and he ends up at Clinton White House fundraisers. And one of those fundraisers is involved Hillary Clinton's alleged effort to refurbish the White House. And this makes a brief appearance in Vince Foster's quote-unquote suicide note. The only mention of Hillary Clinton in that suicide note is relating to her and Khaki Hawker-Smith redecorating and how there was nothing wrong with the finances there. If you're... listeners are familiar with the Vince Foster situation and how Hillary Clinton and her office was involved in finding the suicide note when there was nothing in the briefcase and all of that later. It's very interesting. The only mention of her name would be in trying to absolve that particular fundraiser of, any wrongdoing, which would have been Foster's responsibility. And that's Jeffrey Epstein's, one of his first interactions with the White House. There's a picture of him shaking hands with Bill Clinton at that fundraiser donor reception. And only UK media covered that.
there is a goal, there is a push from the banks themselves, some of the most powerful banks in the world, to have, at least in some countries, a different system that's not a CBDC, because with a CBDC, they can't do fractional reserve banking. And so that's what deposit tokens are all about. Tokenizing deposits, and you can make those programmable and you can surveil them. And it's really just like a CBDC, but they won't call it that. But then the bank controls all the reserves, and maybe they'll bank some of their reserves at the Fed or whatever, but they can still do fractional reserve banking and credit creation and all of this stuff, and not actually have to keep a one-to-one peg of reserves like CBDCs or like a fiat peg stablecoin.
Well, it's a lot to unravel to understand the Ron Brown situation, because it's tied up with that, what I mentioned earlier, Chinagate, which was very difficult even for Congress to investigate. The man at the center of it, who was also the man that Jeffrey Epstein met with repeatedly at the White House, named Mark Middleton, he pleaded the Fifth 28 times, including to the question is, was he a foreign agent? And pretty much every key figure they tried to subpoena also pleaded the Fifth. And there was just, it was very difficult to investigate. And even the George W. Bush administration, the first invocation of executive privilege of Bush as president was, among other things, to block documents about Mark Middleton being made available to Congress. And then 9/11 happens and everyone forgets.
It's important to look at the big picture here. And the big picture is that countries like Argentina and also Lebanon and several countries throughout the world have been targeted by economic warfare for a very long time. Argentina is a very good example. You could argue it began in the 70s and the 80s, and with the economic policy. I mean, when Argentina was a military dictatorship, some of the financial policies they adopted were completely insane. You had a neoliberal in power during the 90s who was very bad for Argentina, in my opinion, Carlos Menem. And then you had their economic collapse in 2001, which, again, you could argue was a direct consequence of a lot of those policies, both of the dictatorship and of Menem's presidency. And then you have the IMF come in and all these other entities. And what they try and do after the 2001 economic collapse is have Argentina engage in things like debt for land swaps, debt for resources swaps. And this has been going on not just in Argentina, but lots of, most of Latin America, arguably, for a very long time. And it's a resource grab.
Yeah.
And, some of what we allude to in this piece and what we hope to allude to in an upcoming reports and, a book. And so the situation in Argentina now didn't just come out of nowhere. And obviously Argentina's central bank has a lot of the blame, but that also didn't happen in a vacuum. Presidents appointed the heads of the central bank that made those policies. And even someone like Milei, who's railed against the Central Bank of Argentina, put former central bank president in a top post in his cabinet. So these are choices that have been made by politicians. As someone who's been and reported from the ground on Argentina and on Argentinian politics, the corruption there, they just don't even, there's politicians in Argentina that don't even try to hide how corrupt they are. It's just flagrant in some instances in a way like I've never experienced anywhere else.
Elizabeth Warren is garbage. The DNC got all this money, from Sam Bankman-Fried? How anti-crypto are they really? I think it's they're willing to play ball and set up regulations and be the kingmakers in the crypto industry. I think there's a lot of I think that's going to happen. And then they're going to try and nix everything that doesn't serve them. And again, financial privacy being the main thing that doesn't serve them. But they also want to give unprecedented control to the DOJ to go and contact any crypto exchange or even Tether, right? And be like, freeze these wallets. We've decided those wallets need to be frozen. So that's escalating, obviously. And, the whole thing that happened with Binance is a big push towards that as well, because now Binance is basically going to have a chaperone appointed by the U.S. government, basically in charge of everything. Their chief compliance officer is a guy that used to work for, the Department of Justice.
Or you look at the people that were around Epstein, even before Epstein gets involved, it becomes very clear that what he was doing was not out of the ordinary for these particular groups, especially like arms dealers, like Adnan Khashoggi. He had an alleged harem of women that he used to blackmail powerful people in the private and public sectors on his yacht, and all other sorts of types of people. Robert Keith Gray, a PR executive that started working for Adnan Khashoggi around the same time Jeffrey Epstein allegedly did, has an alleged history of sexual blackmail for the CIA. And then you have allegations of Roy Cohn, the well-known New York mob attorney, also being involved in sexual blackmail stuff, begins working for Adnan Khashoggi in the same period of time in the 1980s. The more you look, it's quite it's prevalent. But, how prevalent it is, I can't really say, but it definitely does influence our politics, and that's disturbing. If you look at the World Economic Forum or even the Biden administration and a lot of their policy documents, one of their main focuses are rebuilding trust with the public, and it's not working.
Yeah, it's not.
But they may be looking at drastic interventions to make it work, and I think, if we're transhumanism to be shoehorned through, that could happen. And if you're seeing this, this sort of these mergers, because there's many of them, of Silicon Valley companies and big pharma, they're framing it as healthcare, but it's eugenics being framed as healthcare. And it's really
terrifying.
It's terrifying. It's crazy. There's a lot of words for it, but ultimately it has to be stopped. And unfortunately, COVID has set this precedent where it can be mandatory, or where you can lose your livelihood, where you can, not be able to travel. You can basically be placed under house arrest unless you agree to it.
I just want to add really quick about dollarization. Mark and I feel like a lot of the goal of this is covert dollarization through stablecoins. And dollarization has happened in specific Latin American countries in the past, Ecuador, for example, El Salvador. And what happens then is that when they're dollarized, those countries lose their financial sovereignty. They become dependent on decisions of the Fed, and a lot of consequences come from that. So this is an effort by the same architects of even those instances in Ecuador and El Salvador to essentially foist the same thing on Latin America, but under a more, it doesn't seem like overt dollarization when it's stable coins that aren't directly connected to the U.S. government, but they are connected directly to the U.S. Treasury system, for example. And then we also have some of these companies that Zappo are connected to, for example, that are also backed by this Endeavor company that is the focus of this piece, like Satellogic, which was also a key focus of our previous article, Debt from Above. And if you look at the board on Satellogic, you have the former head of the Treasury Department, Steve Mnuchin. You have Howard Lutnick of Cantor Fitzgerald, one of the main, people involved in the Treasury system, right? And then you have someone from the Rohatyn Group, and the Rohatyn Group is named for Nick Rohatyn, who basically led the Latin American debt policies of JP Morgan throughout the 1980s, netting the bank an insane amount of money and really aggravating the Latin American debt crisis as we know it today. So why are all those people on the board of the satellite company, for example? And why do these people pop up at Zappo? Why are these people that also are, involved in stablecoins like PayPal, for example, with PYUSD, why are they all over Endeavor, the PayPal mafia? I think it's so much that it's very hard to ignore and write it off as a coincidence. The Tether play, I think it's really similar, but like in reverse of like what Elon Musk is doing. And OpenAI is like not an open source company. Like they don't make it clear, like, their algorithms and all that stuff are like not transparent. So yeah, it's open in name only, for sure in that case. And I think a lot of people too just like see OpenAI as like its own thing, but really it's essentially like Microsoft at this point. So it's like part of the big tech thing. And Microsoft is involved with a lot of weird stuff going on with AI, specifically with like Windows. Like they're essentially saying like your data is not your data, it's our data. We take your data off of your Windows computer and feed it to our AI. Like that's a requirement you have to agree to use Windows now. And like if they decide to lock you out of your Microsoft account for some reason, you lose all of your data. So your data is not your data on Microsoft now. And that is like an awful business model to support, I think. And I hopefully other people feel that way too. Like I don't want to use Microsoft products if that's how it's going to be. you know? And so OpenAI is like partnered with that same company that's in that same headspace. And ChatGPT is being used for like so much stuff and is being used to like replace people's jobs and potentially entire industries, specifically like staff writers and like more like low level like news desk people. Like there's already major publications that have entirely phased out their staff in that sense.
So a big complaint about Binance from the DOJ is that they were allowing people that were subjected to U.S. sanctions to use their service, but they're not really like a U.S. company, are they? But the U.S. government, I mean, U.S. is an empire. They want to be able to go to any country and say, you can't do that. We're actually in charge. You know what I mean? So Binance not being under their thumb and being active in all these other countries, allowing people in Iran to use their services, for example. I mean, that was a big sticking point for them. It wasn't like criminals, terrorists in Iran. It was just like people in Iran. They're subject to U.S. sanctions. You're not complying with U.S. sanctions. And so we're going to charge you $1 billion and take out your chief executive and put our people in charge, you know? This is the mafia, guys. I wrote a 1,000-page book about how the government is in the U.S. is organized crime, specifically the Department of Justice, and that's what they're doing. And keep in mind too, the DOJ has an insane amount of Bitcoin it holds, and they want more.
The British Eugenics Society, where a lot of this came from. You look at someone like H.G. Wells, best known as a science fiction writer, but also a avowed eugenicist. He predicted that in 100 to 200 years, there would be two human races. There would be the upgraded, augmented elite who were intellectual and attractive and, you know, were the ones that did everything. And then a dwarf-like, troll-like, squat underclass that eats bugs. It seems like, you know, they're selling this as one way. It's all going to be a utopian thing if we all upgrade. I mean, that's how it's being framed, right? But if you look at how these people think, they don't want that. They're looking at feudalism and how do you create a class of slaves that cannot even cognitively rebel ever again.
One of the talking points by prominent Bitcoin influencers for some time has been like, this is a solution to irresponsible central bank policy, government fiscal policy, and you know, things like that, and a debt-based monetary system in general, fiat, what have you. And so what are the implications then of this system that's aiming to you know, yoke the dollar to that and use it to perpetuate the dollar? I think people should seriously be asking themselves, because we're, you know, right now you have like Bitcoin only companies taking lots of money from Tether and being like, we're going to use the dollar to make Bitcoin stronger and stuff. But you can't do that and then also be like, you know, fiat bad, central bank bad, and then just essentially team up with that same system. I mean, it just seems kind of weird, doesn't it? And it's Silicon Valley in bed with the national security state. It's like very overt and in your face. And the Silicon tech, you know, the big billionaires of Silicon Valley, they dominate our social media, our communication, in political discourse in a very significant way. They are a major force in campaign donations. They dominate our politicians in a very significant way. And like Eric Schmidt specifically too is like funding all these guys in the Biden administration and controlling the science and technology policy of the Biden administration, directly funding people in the government, which is totally illegal, but it's happening anyway. Like you can have Politico do like 3 exposés on Eric Schmidt doing that, and there's no accountability from like oversight offices in the government. They just don't do anything about it. They even tell Politico it's bad and nothing happens. I mean, that's mental. That tells you that we've like crossed the Rubicon, just people haven't realized it yet.
I think Bitcoin has the potential to be a tool for financial freedom, but I think it's definitely, there's major efforts well underway to co-opt that to serve the same agenda. Right. And so I think people in the Bitcoin space that want it to be a tool for financial freedom need to get wise to those efforts to co-opt and resist, because it's either a tool of financial freedom or it's not. You know what I mean? And so if you cede enough territory and let them like completely dollarize Bitcoin and turn it into like a tool of U.S. empire to keep the dollar afloat and like, you know, keep dollar hegemony going forever and ever and ever. And, you know, are saying it's a flaw in Bitcoin that you like can't put dollars easily on Bitcoin and all of this. I mean, no. I mean, the whole point, supposedly, right, of creating Bitcoin was to give Wall Street banks the middle finger and create something that had immutable, sound monetary policy. Correct? Mm-hmm. Yeah. So if you allow them to co-opt it so it's not those things anymore, what are you left with? Is it a tool of financial freedom, or is it just, has it, the promise of Bitcoin been hollowed out and replaced with Wall Street garbage? So I think people need to, in the Bitcoin space, need to be very aware that there is a fight being had right now about the future of Bitcoin. And you have to decide which side you're on. Are you going to fight for Bitcoin to be a tool of financial freedom, or are you going to allow it to be co-opted by the powers that be that it was supposedly designed to resist them and, be something they can't control? Are you going to give them control of it? I mean, the answer should be no to any Bitcoiner worth respecting, in my opinion.
Okay, so in the case of like U.S. intelligence, if you go back to the very beginning, and there's even CIA like deputy directors that have said that, it was all Wall Street people at the beginning. It was Wall Street lawyers, it was Wall Street bankers, and since that point, from the genesis of the CIA, there's been revolving doors between CIA and Wall Street that have continued up until today. And really, you could look at the CIA as a public-private enterprise in some sense. It's a public security agency, but it's more or less functioned throughout its history as Wall Street's secret police. That's why its earliest coups, for example, like its first coup in Guatemala, was done on behalf of United Fruit, a major multinational corporation headquartered in the United States, which interestingly enough was later acquired by Leon Black's father, and then Leslie Wexner's business mentor. Started off with money, right, with the stable coin. Now they're going into satellites and brain chips. Musk is doing brain chips and satellites, and he took over a social network, arguably for the user data. And now he's turning, or has made it very explicit, his intentions to turn Twitter X into a bank that he hopes to be half of the financial system. It's very odd. And then when you consider all these like PayPal link ups, well, of course, Musk being a co-founder of PayPal, it's all very like, this coming push to regulate the internet and the destruction of the existing financial system to create this put in place. I've done a lot of reporting on the past and including the simulations of the Wall Street banks, the central banks, and the big tech firms all together simulating a massive cyber attack on the financial system as the reason that this will all be brought in. Whether that's from the World Economic Forum itself or the Carnegie Endowment, which at the time was run by William Burns, who is now CIA director. Yeah. That's definitely stuff to pay attention to. But what if that kind of stuff happens? Well, going back to Argentina for a second, I know a lot of people from Argentina, their economy literally collapsed in 2001. What if those people said about, their advice in dealing with that kind of situation? Don't panic. Don't give in to the fear. Because if you're panicking, give in to the fear, you're not going to make good decisions. You're just not. There's a lot to be said about preparing, but a lot of that preparedness needs to be mental preparedness too. So you don't give in to the fear and panic. The reason they need these events to justify the implementation of these policies is so people are afraid, because people who are afraid are easily manipulated. Mm-hmm. And so that's very easy to handle. But also as far as like these efforts to regulate the internet, when the internet comes back as a regulated whatever, yeah, they'll be able to surveil everything you see, but a lot of content that's there now probably won't be there when it comes back. Yeah. Now's a good time to load up some offline hard drives with all sorts of kinds of information that you may find useful in the future.
In South America, the lockdowns there were brutal. Everyone was under house arrest, basically. You were only allowed out of your house twice a week with papers that you had to show to police. Each paper was good for like roughly 3 hours. And my daughter goes to daycare. She's 4, and she was thankfully, shielded from a lot of this and was able to have interaction and stuff. But a lot of kids weren't. And a lot of kids her age and younger are nonverbal. They scream, like, instead of talking. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's devastating. And the fact that these people, act like it was for the children or for public health when, the evidence increasingly comes out and it wasn't, it was for something else.
The internet from the very beginning was, it originally started as ARPANET, a project of the Pentagon. And for anyone that really wants to know about that history, I would highly recommend the book Surveillance Valley by Yasha Levine. It was essentially created in Vietnam as a counterinsurgency program. That was the goal of it, by the same people that were involved in things like the Phoenix program, which was the first instance of military intelligence, at least U.S. military intelligence, using databases to come up with names of dissidents and then assassinating them. And a lot of them weren't actually dissidents, like suspected dissidents or neighbors of dissidents and all of this stuff. And then from Phoenix program, it goes, all these CIA-backed dictatorships, like, Pinochet in Chile, for example, Operation Condor, use the exact same system. And they've been building these systems with the internet even before the modern internet as we use it now existed. And so a lot of these there were efforts early on to king make the companies who would come to dominate the internet. Why we can still use these things about the internet to our advantage, stuff needs to be done. And this is why I think it's important, specifically in talking to like the Bitcoin community. There's a lot of talented developers there that can build out a lot of this alternative infrastructure. And there are people in the space working on that kind of stuff. But there needs to be more of it. And it can't just be like all this like macro bullish stuff of like, yeah, they say Bitcoin's going to go to $1 million. I think people need to get their head straight and be like, if Bitcoin is going to be a tool for financial freedom, and if I want the reasons I got into Bitcoin to still be Bitcoin in a few years, I need to think about how I can help that happen. Because they're coming for it and they're going to turn it into something else unless people in the Bitcoin space start doing stuff. And that's not to say no one's doing anything, because people are, but there needs to be more awareness of this in the space, and people need to decide which camp they're in. And I think it needs to be culturally unpopular in the Bitcoin space to serve the co-opt agenda. The stakes are higher than they've arguably ever been, because if they manage to get the system in place because of the technology and what they hope to do to people, going as far as stuff like the brain chip and stuff, if it gets to that point, it becomes very hard to undo. And the implications for humans being able to live free lives is very much at stake, right? So this is the time to fight this. It's now. If you're in the Bitcoin space, they want to use Bitcoin to serve their ends, not the people's ends. That there needs to be awareness of that, and people need to make choices, and these discussions need to be had. It obviously happens that the value of Bitcoin has gone way up, and so now I have all this money. But at the same time, if Bitcoin's value goes to $1 bazillion, one Bitcoin, that doesn't mean that you're going to live like a gazillionaire because you have Bitcoin holdings. That's going to mean that the currency, the dollar, the pound, whatever, is being inflated to oblivion. It's like Zimbabwe and Venezuela. So you may be like, wow, I have millions of dollars, but your standard of living is probably going to be the same as it is now. And everyone around you that doesn't hold Bitcoin is going to drown.
The term really entered the American vernacular after the assassination of John F. Kennedy. It's been used to basically claim that if you think powerful people get together to discuss how to advance their power and keep it at the expense of everyone else, and that they have any agency, you're crazy. It all has to be a coincidence. They never have any bad intentions. The people that, are the oligarchs that, fund our politicians and have ties with intelligence and have monopolies and, the technology that runs our lives and stuff like that. Yeah. I mean, it's, I think at this point you have to be quite naive to think that's actually the case.
Bank of America illegally gave a ton of user data and financial transaction data to people, to the federal government on January 6th. And you have JP Morgan debanking people. One of the most notable, I guess it was last year, was Dr. Mercola, who was just taken off, and his whole team really was debanked by JP Morgan. No explanation. I mean, they can do that, and people be like, "Oh, it's a private company; it's their choice." And when the government does it, it's a little bit different, right? So basically, what we have here is a global public-private partnership, and when it's convenient for this particular group, they move into the public sphere, and when it's convenient, they move into the private sphere. That's why you have the revolving door. It's all been intertwined and tied together for a very long time. And now that's why we're being pushed into this new era where it's overt, the stakeholder capitalism era, the era of the public-private partnership, which is, the whole thing of the World Economic Forum and all of that, what they've been promoting since they came into existence in the 70s. Silicon Valley, which is making these products, has too much political power for regulation to even make sense, really. So as far as social media goes, there's no actual discussion about the psychosocial impacts, really. I mean, some of what you'll get is fear mongering about oh, TikTok in China, but you have to keep in mind too that a lot of TikTok executives at this point are American, and they have a lot of weird overlaps with hiring NATO veterans and one of the big guys at Disney. It's not just a CCP company. There's a lot of overlap. And even if you get on just looking at transnational capital, there is a lot of back and forth between the US and China in terms of the elite moneyed classes of both countries. Just as an example, you have a lot of involvement of Steve Schwarzman of Blackstone Capital in China, a lot of involvement. You have people like Elon Musk, who have a lot of business connections to China. And he literally wants to turn Twitter, which he bought, into American WeChat. And, the parent company of WeChat has a huge stake in Tesla and is one of their most active shareholders. So, I mean, it's not, a lot of times you'll get sort of this fear mongering stance about it. And it's of course, China probably does stuff like that, but they also obfuscate a lot of this other stuff that's going on at different levels that doesn't get discussed. Our government most certainly does all the same stuff that they accuse China of doing to Americans too, right? And so that oftentimes gets sort of divorced from the conversation. So if the only political or conversation about it in Washington is oh, we're worried about TikTok only and the CCP and all of this, and then that's how regulation comes into being, it's not going to fix any of these problems. It's just a sort of an opportunistic way for them to make it look like they're doing something. But really, our government will continue to do it to the American population, even if China is not, with their one app. And we have how many apps that are run by cutouts of US intelligence operating social media right now. I don't really know if it's that easy to fix when it comes to regulation, because we've talked about on your show before, I think a lot of the issues with the government and also with Wall Street and banking too are not as easy a fix as people would like it to think, because the system is just too broken, and it can't regulate itself. It can't investigate itself. There's definitely a very serious break in that system. And so there has to be an alternative built by us, the people, in its place, because the same people at the top that broke this current system are also building a new system, for us to be herded into. And so, there's a fork in the road regardless. Everyone knows the existing system is broken. So the answer at the end of the day about how to fix really all of this stuff is are we going to go into the new system that's being built for us, or will we make our own system?